Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You know, we love to pick a fascinating topic and really get into the nitty gritty, and today is no exception. We are talking about the legendary P-47 Thunderbolt.
The Jug.
That's right, the Jug. This iconic World War II fighter is, well, it's a beast, and we're going to learn all about it.
A good one.
Yeah, and our jumping off point is an excerpt we found simply titled Pasted Text. Seems to be from a Johnny 5 down in Valdosta, Georgia.
Sounds like someone's got a thirst for knowledge.
They sure do. Johnny 5, if you're out there listening, we hope we answer all your questions about the P-47 because we are going to cover it all, folks.
Everything from its design and development to its combat roles, its incredible pilots, even where you can see one in person today.
So strap in and get ready for a wild ride through aviation history because we are about to take off.
You know, one of the things that always fascinates me about the P-47 is how it evolved over time. It wasn't always the hulking beast we picture, you know.
Oh, really? I always think of it, you know, 850 caliber machine guns just shrugging off flak like it was nothing. It was born that way, right?
Not quite. You see, initially the P-47 was actually envisioned as a lightweight interceptor.
What?
Yeah, the idea was to have this really fast, nimble aircraft for quick engagements.
Wow, that's so different from the image I have in my head. So how did it go from featherweight to, you know, the juggernaut we know and love?
Well, as World War II progressed, the need for a tougher, more versatile aircraft became very clear. You know, they needed something that could not only dish it out, but also take a punch.
Right. It had to be able to survive those intense battles.
Exactly. And that's where the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine comes in.
Okay, now we're talking. This 18-cylinder radial engine was a beast, right over 2,000 horsepower.
Yeah, it was a powerhouse.
I mean, I think about, you know, car engines today, and that's like 10 times the horsepower of a typical family car. Just incredible. Was that kind of power common for fighter planes back then?
Not really. The P-47 was an outlier in terms of its raw power.
So not just powerful, but fast too, right?
Oh yeah. Top speeds over 400 miles per hour and a service ceiling of over 40,000 feet.
That's insane. I mean, think about that for a second. Most other fighters couldn't even reach those altitudes. That's a huge advantage.
Huge tactical advantage.
Absolutely. But, you know, we've talked about power and speed, but you also mentioned toughness. How did they make the P-47 able to withstand enemy fire?
They went all out. They gave it heavy armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, a reinforced airframe. I mean, this thing was practically a flying tank.
I've seen those pictures, you know, the P-47s coming back to base riddled with bullet holes. It's amazing that they were able to stay in the air.
Testament to its rugged construction.
It must have been a sight for sore eyes for those pilots to see their airfield knowing their plane could take that kind of punishment.
Absolutely.
But all that armor, it must have added a lot of weight.
It did, which is why that massive engine was so crucial. It provided the power needed to haul all that weight and still deliver that incredible performance.
So it wasn't just brute force. There was a lot of engineering ingenuity that went into this aircraft.
Oh yeah, a lot of thought went into making it all work together.
Well, let's talk about another defining feature of the P-47, the firepower.
Yes, the business end.
I mean, 8 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns mounted in the wings, that's just mind-blowing.
That's a lot of lead to throw down range.
More than double what many other fighters had at the time. I mean, can you imagine being an enemy pilot going up against that?
I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that.
It sounds terrifying. So the P-47 could really dish it out, but was it limited to just being a fighter?
Not at all. It was a true multi-role aircraft. It could carry bombs, rockets, you name it.
Wow, so this thing was versatile.
Incredibly versatile. It could handle a wide variety of missions.
Okay, so we've got a tough, powerful, heavily armed aircraft. What else could a pilot ask for?
Well, how about incredible range? The P-47 could fly long distances, especially when equipped with external fuel tanks.
Oh yeah, I've heard about those drop tanks.
We're talking 800 miles on a standard mission and over 1,900 miles with those extra tanks.
1,900 miles. That's almost coast to coast in the U.S. That's unbelievable. How did that impact the way the P-47 was used in the war?
It was a game changer. It meant the P-47 could escort bombers deep into enemy territory without having to turn back for fuel. They could perform long-range strikes on their own, hitting targets far beyond the reach of other fighters.
So it really extended the reach of Allied air power.
Absolutely. It was a force multiplier in both the European and Pacific theaters.
Well, this is incredible stuff. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here, and I'm already blown away by the P-47's capabilities.
Just wait, there's so much more to discover.
Okay, well, let's get into those combat roles, because I know the P-47 saw action in some of the most intense battles of World War II, starting with the European theater.
Ah, yes, those iconic images of P-47s escorting B-17 bombers over Europe.
Exactly. I mean, what was it like for those pilots going up against the Luftwaffe?
It was a clash of titans. The P-47s were tangling with some of the best German fighters out there, like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190.
Those dogfights must have been intense. So how did the P-47 stack up against those German fighters? What was its fighting style?
Well, the P-47 wasn't the most agile aircraft, but it was fast and it was tough.
Right, the flying tank.
Exactly. So P-47 pilots often relied on a tactic called boom and zoom. They would use the P-47's speed to dive down on enemy fighters from a higher altitude, unleash a devastating burst from those 8 machine guns, and then climb back up to safety.
Hit hard and get out fast. It's a good strategy when you have the speed and firepower on your side.
It was very effective.
Those German pilots must have been terrified to see a P-47 screaming down on them.
I'm sure it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Okay, so we've talked about the European theater, but the P-47 also saw action in the Pacific, right? How did it perform in that very different environment?
It was a workhorse in the Pacific as well, especially during those island hopping campaigns against the Japanese.
Yeah,
right.
Conditions there were brutal heat, humidity, salt water.
Yeah, it was really tough on the aircraft. But the P-47's toughness made it ideal for that environment, and its firepower proved incredibly effective in close air support missions.
Close air support, so providing air cover for troops on the ground.
Exactly. Imagine you've got heavily fortified Japanese positions dug into those islands. You need a tough aircraft that could withstand ground fire and deliver serious punch. The P-47 was perfect for that role.
Wow, it sounds like the P-47 was at home in the Pacific jungle as it was in the skies over Europe. Truly a remarkable aircraft, and one that clearly attracted some remarkable pilots too, right? I mean, the P-47 produced some of the top scoring aces of the war.
Absolutely. Names like Francis Gabby Gabreski, who achieved 28 aerial victories.
Wow, 28, that's incredible. And Robert S. Johnson right behind him with 27.
Yeah, those are staggering numbers.
What set these pilots apart? Was it just skill, or did the P-47 give them an edge?
It was a combination of factors. I mean, they were incredibly skilled and courageous individuals, no doubt, but the P-47's capabilities definitely played a role. Its speed, firepower, and toughness gave them the confidence to press their attacks and come out on top.
28 victories. I mean, that's 28 separate aerial combats, each one a life or death struggle. It's hard to even fathom.
It takes incredible skill and bravery.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the P-47 as this legendary aircraft, this icon of World War II, but can people still experience the P-47 today, or is it just a relic of the past?
Oh, you can definitely still experience the P-47. There are a number of museums around the world where you can see one up close and personal, like the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C.
Of course, the Smithsonian, they have everything.
They do, and if you're ever in Dayton, Ohio, the National Museum of the United States Air Force has a fantastic collection, including a P-47.
So people can actually stand in the presence of this aircraft in the very countries where it made history. That's amazing. But are there any places where you can see a P-47 in its element soaring through the sky?
There are organizations like the Plains of Fame Air Museum in California, the Collings Foundation in Massachusetts, and the Commemorative Air Force, which has chapters all over the U.S. All of them maintain and fly restored P-47s. You might even catch one at an air show near you.
Now that's something I would love to see. Imagine a P-47 roaring overhead just like it did back in the day. It gives me chills just thinking about it. We've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to explore. Are you ready to dive deeper into the heart of this incredible machine?
Let's do it. Can't wait to get into the nuts and bolts of the P-47.
All right, well then buckle up, folks, because things are about to get even more interesting. All right, I am ready to geek out a little bit because part one left me with a ton of questions about how the P-47 actually worked, all the nuts and bolts and the engineering that went into this incredible machine.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. For its time, it really was a marvel of engineering.
And I think, a big part of that story is the engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp. We touched on it before. But I'm really curious to learn more about how it worked and how it made the P-47 so effective.
Well, it's not just about the raw horsepower. It's about the design choices they made that made it so effective in the P-47.
Okay, so we keep tossing around this term, radial engine, but I'll admit I'm a little fuzzy on what that actually means.
Sure, no problem. Imagine a starburst with the cylinders. as the points. That's essentially what a radial engine looks like. The cylinders are arranged in a circle around a central crankshaft.
Okay, I've been picturing it.
And this design, it was incredibly reliable and powerful.
Yeah.
Perfect for a warbird that needed to be able to take a beating.
Right, because, we talked about the P-47's toughness. It needed an engine that could keep up with that.
Exactly, and the radial engine was perfect for that.
So tough, powerful.
Yeah.
What else did this radial design offer?
Well, it's air-cooled, which meant no bulky, vulnerable liquid cooling system.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that made the engine lighter and more resistant to damage, which, was obviously crucial in combat.
Less to go wrong, less to get shot up, I get it. But 2,000 horsepower, that is just an insane amount of power to me. How did they harness that energy and transfer it to the propeller? I mean, did the P-47 just want to rip itself apart on takeoff?
Well, that's where the gearbox comes in, a real unsung hero in this story. It used a 2-speed supercharger to maintain power at high altitudes and reduction gears to convert the engine's high RPM, revolutions per minute, to a lower RPM suitable for the propeller.
Okay, so it's becoming clear to me that, every element of the P-47 was carefully considered.
Yeah.
There was a lot of thought put into how all these different pieces work together.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a symphony of engineering.
But it couldn't have just been about brute force, right?
Yeah.
How did the P-47's design help it excel in those high-speed dogfights?
Well, you're hitting on a key point here. The P-47 wasn't just a flying battering ram. It was aerodynamically sophisticated. Remember those boom and zoom attacks we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Hit hard and get out fast.
Exactly. Well, the P-47's thick wing and laminar flow airfoil made it a diving champion.
Okay, laminar flow. I need a crash course on that one.
Sure. Think of it as air flowing smoothly over the wing's surface, like a gentle stream. Less drag means the P-47 could build up tremendous speed in a dive, making it almost impossible for enemy fighters to escape.
So it's like the air is just gliding right over the wings.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see why the P-47 was so formidable. It wasn't just about raw power, it was about combining that power with really smart design choices.
Exactly. They really thought of everything.
Well, almost everything, right? Because there was one more piece of the puzzle that we haven't touched on yet, the turbocharger.
Ah, yes. The turbocharger, a crucial piece of technology that allowed the P-47 to perform at its best.
Okay, so break it down for me. What did the turbocharger do?
Essentially, it was a pump that forced more air into the engine.
And why was that important?
Well, it was crucial for maintaining power at high altitudes, where the air is thinner, you see.
Right, less oxygen up there.
Exactly. So the turbocharger allowed the P-47 to operate effectively above most other fighters, giving it a significant tactical advantage.
So they essentially gave the P-47 the ability to breathe at altitudes where other planes were gasping for air.
That's a great way to put it.
But wasn't that a pretty complex system for the time? I mean, we're talking about World War II here.
Oh, it was incredibly complex. Early versions of the turbocharger, they had their share of issues. It was heavy, bulky, and prone to reliability problems, especially in the harsh conditions of combat.
So not a perfect system right out of the gate.
Not at all. But the engineers at Republic Aviation, they were relentless. They kept refining the design, overcoming obstacles, and eventually created a turbocharger system that was both powerful and reliable.
It's amazing to me how they continued to push the boundaries of what was possible back then. They didn't just settle for good enough, they kept striving for better.
They were driven to create the best possible aircraft for the pilots who were putting their lives on the line.
And speaking of those pilots, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the ground crews, the folks who kept these complex machines running.
Absolutely, the unsung heroes of the P-47's flight.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the thrill of combat, but without those dedicated ground crews working tirelessly to maintain and repair these aircraft, often under incredible pressure and in dangerous conditions, the P-47 wouldn't have been nearly as effective.
They were the backbone of the Thunderbolt's success. Their skill and dedication deserve just as much recognition as the pilots who flew them.
It really highlights how much teamwork went into every aspect of the P-47 story, from the designers and engineers to the factory workers, the ground crews, and of course the pilots who put their lives on the line.
It was a true team effort.
A true team effort, well said, but I have a feeling there are even more fascinating layers to this story. We've talked about the P-47's strength, its power, its toughness, its range. But every aircraft has its quirks, right?
Absolutely.
So what were some of the P-47's quirks, and did they ever lead to any interesting stories?
Oh, definitely buckle up, because things are about to get interesting.
All right, so spill the beans. What were some of those quirks?
Well, for all its strength, the P-47 wasn't exactly known for its grace.
Bomber out of action.
What do you mean?
Well, it was one of the heaviest single-engine fighters of World War II. We're talking over 10,000 pounds empty.
2,000 pounds. Wow, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Giving a comparison, what does that even feel like?
Imagine two Full-grown rhinoceroses taking to the skies, that's essentially what we're talking about.
Okay, that is a mental image I won't soon forget. It must have taken some serious skill to handle a beast like that in the air.
It did. Well, the P-47 was a powerhouse in a dive.
Mm.
It wasn't as nimble as some of his counterparts.
So, not exactly built for aerial acrobatics.
Think of it more like a linebacker than a ballerina.
Okay, I get it, but hey, when you've got 850 caliber machine guns, who needs to be fancy?
That's the spirit. But you're right, those quirks did lead to some interesting situations. Well, there's a famous story about a P-47 pilot who, after a long and disorienting mission, accidentally landed on an aircraft carrier.
Wait, what an aircraft carrier those are for Navy planes with those cool hooks that snag the arresting wires. How did a P-47 even land on one of those?
It was a case of mistaken identity. The pilot, exhausted and confused, he mistook the carrier for his home airfield.
Oh no.
But he managed to land safely, much to the surprise of the sailors on board, I'm sure.
I can only imagine the radio chatter on that carrier talk about an unexpected visitor.
It's one of those legendary aviation anecdotes. It highlights the unpredictable nature of war, but it also speaks to the skill of the pilot who managed to pull off a safe landing in such a bizarre situation.
Right. I mean, it makes you realize that even with the most advanced technology, the human element is always a factor.
Always.
But, these quirks, they add to the P-47's personality, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The P-47 wasn't perfect, but it was effective, and its unique character earned it a place in the hearts of those who flew and maintained it.
Speaking of character, where'd the nickname Jug come from? It doesn't exactly scream, fierce fighter plane.
There are a few theories floating around. Some say it's because the P-47's shape, with its big radial engine and rounded fuselage, resembled a milk jug.
I can kind of see that, especially with those, big rounded cheeks housing the engine.
Another theory points to the canopy. When it was open, it kind of resembled the spout of a jug.
Interesting. No matter the origin, it's a name that's stuck, and it seems to fit the P-47 perfectly tough, a bit ungainly, but it gets the job done, which makes me think about the P-47's nose art. I bet there were some pretty creative designs out there.
Oh, definitely. Nose art was a big part of aviation culture during World War II.
Yeah.
P-47 supported everything from fierce tigers and eagles to pin-up girls and cartoon characters.
Wow, so they really let their personality shine through.
Each design reflected the personality of the pilot and the squadron, adding a human touch to these powerful machines.
It's those personal touches that really bring history to life. It's not just about the specs and the statistics, it's about the people who designed, built, flew, and maintained these aircrafters. Their stories are just as important as the planes themselves.
I couldn't agree more, and that's what makes this deep dive into the P-47 so fascinating. It's a story of innovation, courage, and the incredible things that can be accomplished when people work together towards a common goal.
Well said. We've explored the P-47's evolution, its strengths, its quirks, its enduring legacy. It's a story that continues to inspire aviation enthusiasts today.
We've delved into its remarkable engine, its rugged design, its impressive combat record, and the stories of the people who made it all possible.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn.
Absolutely. Keep exploring. Keep digging deeper into the stories behind the machines and the people who shaped our world.
Who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself standing in front of a real P-47 Thunderbolt one day, feeling the weight of history and marveling at the ingenuity of those who came before us.
Until then, happy flying, everyone.